Welcome back, everyone, to the Tuesday night episode of Getting Defensive, brought to you by Gridiron Ratings. I am Kraig, and with me, as always, is Gary, the IDP tipster. James is off on a special assignment again this week, but he should be back next week with even more information to go over with us. And I want to start off by telling you guys, as always, make sure you head over to Gridiron Ratings on YouTube, which is where you're watching us. So hopefully you are already subscribed, but if not, please subscribe. Every 25 subscriptions, they give away one of their 2021 draft and playbook guides, $40 value, but they give one away. So make sure you sign up, and hopefully we'll be able to give another one away soon for you guys. And, we'll let you know who wins when there is one, and then we'll be in contact to let you know all about it. So, Gary, how are you doing tonight?
Doing good. How about you?
I'm doing great. It's Tuesday night. We got another week of football on the books with, that 3-day turnaround from Monday to Thursday is nice and quick. Doesn't give you a whole lot of time to start digesting things, but it's good to talk through with a great IDP mind like yourself. So,
Flattering.
well, it's true. So, the Tuesday format again, we sort of interweave news and notes, injuries with who we think is going to be coming up, other people that are becoming relevant or falling off in relevancy. So we're going to get into it right away, and I'm going to give you my opinion on this one to start, but we'll see what Gary thinks after. CJ Henderson was traded to the Carolina Panthers from the Jacksonville Jaguars. He seemingly fell out of favor with the new coaching staff in Jacksonville after being, I think it was a top 10 pick a couple of years ago by them. He was traded for Dan Arnold, a tight end, and a third-round pick, which seems light. But on the other hand, when you give up on a guy and it's pretty publicly known, you aren't going to be getting just a ton back, that same sort of capital you invested in him. As far as fantasy relevancy, he's certainly going to have to get up to speed here, and it seems like a reactionary move to rookie cornerback who was doing well, J.C. Horn, getting hurt. But they do still have some guys there, and the depth chart, of course, they have Dante Jackson. They also have Rashad Melvin, I believe, and there's another guy that I had written here that I don't have pulled up. Oh, Bouye, they had signed, who will be coming back. He's suspended right now. So it'll be interesting to see if he gets playing time, but even quarterback leagues, I don't think this has a whole lot of fantasy relevancy at the moment. Any thoughts on that, Gary?
Yeah, I definitely don't think that I'm going to worry about it this first week, at least. If Henderson does play, it's hard to believe that he'll just play a full complement of snaps this weekend.
Yeah.
I suppose it's possible, but I do believe that I looked at the matchup, and the matchup was solid. Who do they play?
The Panthers this week. That's good.
Dallas? Yeah, actually.
Yeah, they do play Dallas. That's right.
Actually, on paper, I do believe that's like a top 10 MSR, but, unfortunately, I'd go look at Dante Jackson instead. He's going to play the entire game just to make sure who's playing opposite of him. But after that, matchup-wise, if he steps in, and whoever's playing that position is probably – going to be productive, at least streamable, and versus matchup. It's more general cornerback take than anything.
Yeah, and of course, it's really only cornerback specific leagues. You're streaming them if that. There's very few cornerbacks, as we've mentioned, that you'd want to have on your team and consider startable week in and week out at general DB position. Something of more interest here for more IDP leagues, anyway. A guy that seemingly can't get over injuries throughout his career. This time had a big one. Blake Martinez, the main guy in the middle for the New York Giants. He left the game early. He was replaced by Tae Crowder, and then Reggie Ragland had more snaps. But he is, being Martinez, unfortunately going to be out for the year with a torn ACL, they found. They didn't think it was that bad. They did testing, and they got that bad news. So do you think that it's going to be Crowder? Are they going to be looking out for someone else in free agency, or who else they have on their team that interests you in that spot?
Well, by default, you're looking at Tae Crowder and Reggie Ragland. Those two were seeing the next amount of snaps with Martinez. Is that a real appealing? Realistically, no, but I mean, one of those two is probably going to be one of those inside guys for sure, getting more snaps. It looked like Crowder. Crowder's been on the field, and when Martinez went down, Crowder had a lot of snaps, and that's how he produced. I don't know. I don't know how long it'll last. There's a guy on the bench that I've already informed members of the IDP dime drop. So, but I guess I've told him a couple of times, so I'm going to talk about him. I really like Carter Coughlin, and I think that there's a big chance that by the time they lose a few more games, that they might be giving him a try. He's a converted outside linebacker, second-year guy, and I've been tracking him for a while. He's got a chance to make an impression. I was getting him on people's radar before Martinez ever went down because I mentioned how well he was doing. Plus, I believe Martinez had an out, or it's the end of his contract next year, possibly, maybe not, or there was an out. But either way, dynasty-wise, plus Crowder has never been anything special. Yeah. So, and this Coughlin was, reportedly showing good coverage skills. So, I don't know. But either way, I don't think, but if he got the full-time job, it's productive by default, period. So you got to pay attention to whoever it is going to end up playing those 90-plus snaps. They'll be the guy to get.
For the first game anyway, and we'll have to see how it plays out. Like I said, Tae Crowder had taken over the play calling in that majority. He ended up with like a 98% snap share, and then Raglan kind of fell in behind to that 50-60% that Crowder had been playing. And Crowder, to your point, he hasn't been anything exciting. They do have an out. It's only about $5.5 million dead cap if they get rid of Martinez after this year, and that team. I have to think at some point they might be looking at trying to hit the reset button on some of these older guys because the team is going to have to get younger. They're just not competing right now, and it isn't even close.
They just keep hitting repeat over and over again.
Yeah. All righty. So at the moment, Tae Crowder, but don't be throwing a whole bunch of free agent dollars at him or something because he could be replaced here coming up.
Don't get too excited yet, folks.
And this one is sort of just more of a philosophical thing that we've talked about with some of these guys and injuries. And I know we say most injuries are fluke things, but a guy like Derwin James, who, he finished the game, but he separated his shoulder. And, Joey Bosa even said after the game in an interview, he was hurt as well for the Chargers. But Derwin told him that his shoulder popped out of socket. I think he missed a couple snaps and he got his shoulder back in and he went back out there. But when you see a guy like that continually just has some sort of injuries popping up, and it sort of feels like a ticking time bomb in the background there because you just can never be fully healthy. When you're going into your ratings, do you take that into account, sort of like when you're looking at the year-long view?
The all-season ratings just, was this the second or third year in a row that he just blew up his ADP because everybody just keeps he's coming back this year. You keep ranking him up there, right?
Yeah.
And I got to admit, I was a little bit guilty of it myself. He creeped up. He didn't start out there, but I did a couple updates, and he creeped up, Yeah. I mean, what can you say, His name in that first year of play has really carried him through his career in fantasy football, So I'm more interested in seeing, you got to keep this kid on speed dial, and that's at Gilman.
Yeah, like Ohani Gilman, I think, or Gillum. Yeah. Who had a nice game.
Yeah. I can't believe how Adderley is actually, producing consistently. He's not like killing it, but I'm pretty sure he's had like 3 or 4 or 2 or 3 good games, hasn't he? But either way, yeah, solid games. And that's the main thing you got to worry about, especially in bigger leagues. Don't take the 0, take the consistency at a decent number. That you can work with that.
Yeah, and the other thing that you run into with one of these things, to your point about Derwin, he's sitting somewhere, right now, depending on your scoring. Again, this is generally sort of looking at a more balanced format. In the late 30s or 40s, he isn't even doing a whole lot on the field for you, and he's probably a guy because of that name recognition. If you got him, you paid up decently from maybe where like you would take him, Gary, and that just it ends up hurting you when you have that
I
injury
haven't
thing.
drafted him in years.
Yeah, and to your point about Gilman, he's playing a lower percentage of snaps, but he had 7 solos for you and a relatively middling snap count. And it does seem like he's a guy. Teams in general are putting 3 safeties out there a lot more often, which is interesting. And I think maybe that's part of the reason we're seeing some of these just reduced scores from players in secondaries. And Adderley is, the best out of the bunch in terms of fantasy scoring. He's sitting up there with 18 solos and 3 assists. I mean, mostly just tackles out of him. It feels like he's sort of taken over just that consistent guy in that secondary that you'd have interest in.
Yeah. And that Gillum or whatever his name was, he'll, he's on speed dial because of Derwin's going to be banged up already. How long does he miss time? I haven't heard. I tried to look. I couldn't find anything necessarily about it.
There wasn't anything definitive, but with a guy like that, it wouldn't surprise you either way.
Right. So you're having a scare on an underachiever right now.
A big name, yeah. I mean, that's injury scare, underachieving, and high draft capital most likely for what you're getting out of them. So yeah, that's a bad combo.
Imagine in dynasty leagues, people have been sitting with him on their IR for like 3 years.
Well, yeah, and you're probably getting offers for him too, because there's someone else in your league that probably likes him. That says, "Oh, he's injured." Put a little bit of an offer out there at a discount, and if you're not taking it, boy, Speaking of, I know we don't like talking about the offense, but it kind of feels sort of like in a different way because it isn't suspension, but Josh Gordon, where there's still people that have hung on to that guy. There's people that are just going to keep biting on him. We're like, oh, he's back again, and yeah, he had otherworldly talent. But that was 6-7 years ago that he was doing that stuff.
People went to counseling over Josh Gordon. They're like, it's a doc. I just can't drop him. I don't know what it is.
The last time that he came back, so not in 2019, I think it was 2017 or something. I finally got out of my last share. Someone offered me a second form or something. And I'm like, if he blows up, it's not going to be on my roster. I don't need the headache. And that was my last share of him. But it kind of feels that same way with Derwin James. I don't have any shares of him in any of the leagues that I'm in because he goes too high for the comfort level that I have, mainly because of injuries. But you got to learn to when to cut bait.
Speaking of a player like that, I was thinking about it. Actually, spoke out loud about it. With Chase Young, I have no shares of Chase Young. I had 8-9 drafts, all full IDP. No shares of Chase Young. I just had this feeling, I don't know. I'm not going to say he's a bust. He's far from a bust, folks. Don't get me wrong. But I'm certainly the ADP that it cost to get him.
Yeah.
I'm glad at this point that I didn't jump on that, because it was going to cost you a pretty penny. It was going to cost you just as good as a top 5 guy. So at edge or DL. So there's a lot, but we're going to be talking a little bit more about these underperformers, I believe, in a little bit.
Yep. Next up, we're going to a team that you've had a lot of interest in here and talked about. Jamie Collins. They couldn't find a trade. Detroit Lions looking to get rid of him, and today they decided we're just going to cut bait with you. It kind of feels like Derek Barnes is going to be the next guy up, and Alex Anzalone had a really nice week, I believe, this past week for the Lions, still playing that 100% snap count. Barnes did not fully step in and just, take over sort of that position. There was, I think, 47% about of Jalen Reeves-Maben, who isn't overly exciting himself, so I don't know how long that will last, but initially it feels like it's sort of a split here. So do you still think, does this improve Anzalone's outlook for the year? That Collins hadn't been doing a whole lot to begin with, but with him just really being the guy at the moment, I know he was one of your preseason names you were talking about. How are you feeling about him?
Well, first, talking about Maybeam, I want to congratulate the guy for hanging out as long as he has to be in this situation. Congratulations, because he's been a special team demon for him, but him and what was the guy they just cut that they had a lot of stock in?
Jelani Tavai.
Yeah, I don't even know if he's got another job or was picked up off wires. I'm not really sure.
I know he's signed somewhere, and he actually got playing time.
Right. But, yeah, I don't see how it's not Derek Barnes in the end. I mean, basically, maybe all of a sudden Maybeam's a new guy. He's a totally different player. But, I get a feeling sooner than later it's going to be Derek Barnes in there because it's probably his job heading into next year. Might as well get him out there. As far as Anzalone, man, he was kind of like a breakout call of mine. And then he got the green dot. He's finally producing. It's kind of like I don't want to jinx nothing, but considering the talent that's on that depth chart, now I don't think he's going anywhere.
Yeah.
Because when Derek Barnes was really shining in the preseason, and then you see Anzalone is not producing much. He's just out there. It's just like, okay, so I never really thought ahead. I thought more of Barnes being Anzalone's replacement this year in season, not Collins. So we were talking about Thursday about Collins and what they might be doing because the rumor just came out he was on the block and everything. And we brought it up. We even looked it up on Cap Hit and everything and was talking about it. It's a possibility they could cut him because who's going to trade for the guy? He's kind of, if you see him, he almost looks like he's gained weight. He's just not, he's not that guy he used to be. He's probably lost some heart since joining Detroit. So,
wouldn't be the first guy.
Like end of the career type, to write this contract out. But anyways, I'm really, we talk about the craziness with the snap counts with Tracy Walker, Will Harris, and what was it? Bobby Price, maybe. I think they all had like that 70% or something. They all got a fair amount of play.
Dean Marlowe. Dean Marlowe is the other one. Will Harris Walker and Dean Marlowe.
Okay. All right. So,
and Walker, had the lowest out of them at 67. The other two at 76, which most people out there probably haven't heard the name Dean Marlowe or could tell you what team that he's on.
I was calling him Bobby Price.
Yeah, I think you're thinking of, and this is something we can talk about after, but it's the same thing. Bobby McCain, that Washington secondary was just a crazy split this week too. So you're seeing a few teams do this. Do you think it is just because of the longer season and people really not being in game shape? I know we talked about it a bit last week, but
I got to be honest. I've been saying it since I've been writing and doing this about 5 years ago. There was a trend then to these more 3 safety, 5 defensive back sets. So I think it's coming into play harder this year with a lot more teams. So we're noticing it, and it's not helping when you have players that are only getting like 50 to 60% snaps, but they're producing like they were a full-time player when the full-time players aren't next to them.
Yeah.
So it's like confusing. And, I know this was one of our top topics we were going to lean into, but if you think about it, I can't say it's what's happening, but if this continues, there's like certain players, say like Bennett or Roberts for Miami and for New England, who's linebackers, both of them were under 60%, but they had plays. They had, they produced well those games. You got to be careful with those, but it might become the trend. I don't know with either defensive backs or the linebackers at least. It seems like that, we still got a lot of teams rotating in DL, but we still pretty well sustained or, got that same level of talent and player pool out there as we usually have. So it's really interesting. We were talking before the program. I mean, if you're in a redraft league, you seriously, if it's a standard side league and there's plenty of IDP meat on the wire, you might have to seriously consider start playing the matchups and whoever's got the hot hand. Because you got players like John Johnson not living up to it. Chin's not been living up to it. You got to admit there's a lot of people out there, a lot of these safeties. Derwin James didn't live up to it. I don't know. Help me out, Kraig. There's a few different, plus the linebackers.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you want to talk about safeties that are, a lot farther down, Walker, we just talked about, Jabril Peppers, a lot of people, another guy that they had spent a lot on. He's just sitting around that safety
on the
too.
Wire in our sleeper league. I picked him up.
Well, I mean, Justin Simmons, even, I know we really like him. He's sitting down there in the 30s.
I don't know what happened to that defense. What's up with Justin over there? But there's quite a few. Beard, whatever's Beard for Tennessee. I don't think is really
Beard
overall. Yeah, there's a lot, and plus all the linebackers. Then you have Chase Young. You have it's getting it's getting down to the wire. We're heading into week 4. Week 5 might really, you could consider week 5 and 6 if it's still like this. Might be the pace we have for the rest of the year. Well, dynasty leagues, especially if you've got a lot of money wrapped up into these guys because of how they produced and you've enjoyed that production, you might be a little bit upset this year and trigger happy.
Yeah, and it might be just something where we, as IDP owners have to learn to adjust more, sort of like, again, on the offensive side where there's more of these timeshares. You've seen it all over with running backs. When you have teams that are spreading it out more to 3 and 4 wide receivers, if they don't have a true alpha, it just gets spread around a lot more, and you have to adjust to that frustrating level of inconsistency a little bit.
Yeah. I like to actually encourage people to go to gridironratings.com, go to my tipster's office and to pull down on the IDP menu. And I have a rolling waiver wire that I'm doing now. And it keeps track of players for at least 3 weeks if they don't fail. But either way, there's like 32 players on here right now. I have some had some guys that we've been tracking. Just check it out. It's different. It's a rolling waiver wire. I'll be updating it on Mondays and Tuesdays. But Tuesdays would be when we add the new additions to it. But go check that out. I like Anzalone. I wanted to mention too. Anzalone actually has a solid MSR matchup this weekend when we were talking about him. And Crowder, on top of that, believe it or not, if he is a full guy, he's got a strong matchup this weekend too. So these guys might actually really impress. I've been pleased with what Will Harris has been doing, considering, and then he turned around and got more snaps than Walker. At least Willis I think he's been consistent. Another one of those players that sometimes consistency can really matter in deeper formats.
Yep. He's been sitting around 4, 6, and 6 solos with a couple assists each game with, to your point, at least there's a little floor for you for what you're getting out of him most weeks.
And that's probably got a little bit to do with whatever it is they're doing with those inside linebackers. If they bring Derek Barnes in and he really lives up to the position, it didn't seem like Collins was feeling the need, at that position. So, but if they can get Derek Barnes on there and he can do his job, well, that probably will eat into a little bit of production in that secondary. It's just a matter of talent in front of that safety and DB group. You've only the line's cool, I guess. I mean, you got Flowers, a couple big guys on there. It's not like the best in the league, so. That's why if they stay the way they are going right now, that's if you own somebody in the secondary, you're probably going to be happy for the rest of the season, as long as they can stay healthy.
Yeah, and at least with Detroit too. I mean, that team is playing hard for that new coach. Those guys. There's a lot of less heralded guys and rookies in that along that defensive line. But if you watch the game, they're putting in effort. You know, a lot of them are still learning where to go and what to do, but they're trying hard for them.
Oh, yeah. And they're all working for future contracts. It's a make or break. Do you want me back next year or not?
Got to earn your spot.
Yeah.
And speaking of earning your spot, this next one was an interesting one. Quincy Williams got cut at the very end of August by the Jaguars at the end, and then he got scooped up on waivers by the Jets. Didn't really play the first week. Second week, he started getting into the snap counts. He was up to 91% and then 94 this past week. And he's actually been performing well. You know, Mosley's been the guy there in the middle, as we had expected for him. He's got 13 tackled solos, and he's got 11 assists. But in the 2 games, Quincy's at 10 solos, 2 assists, and 4 tackles for a loss with a nice chunk of playing time. And it feels like they're giving him a chance to sort of be that other guy, at least until Jared Davis gets back, who, you know, we'll have to see what happens there. But you know, Quincy had 3rd-round draft capital, and he had some injury issues. But do you think he might find a home here on the Jets?
I think it speaks more. Again, it's kind of a broad thing, and to notice that because they actually put him on the waiver wire article. I mean, for one, this was out of the blue to me. I hadn't even noticed that he had snuck in here. I thought they were still playing those 7th-round rookies. So to see this, right? You know, I can still remember back when, 2 years ago when they drafted him late in the draft, Jacksonville did, and he was supposed to be some kind of hot sleeper or something, you know, and just a former safety, wasn't he? I believe, maybe.
I don't know if he was in college or not. I know he went to a smaller college. Yeah. I'll look it up here quick. But yeah, he was a 3rd-rounder out of Murray State.
Yeah. So yeah, I couldn't. Still, though, I think it was overhyped. Well, I guess that proved true. But they're using his veteran presence. You know, he's brother to the defensive. Yeah. So, you know, whatever's working there, I'm confident that it won't last forever because if Jared Davis comes back, I think it was supposed to be around the bye week.
Yep.
When he comes back, he probably will slot in. Within a couple of games, will be playing 100%. As soon as he gets his legs back underneath him, you know. So I don't imagine that Quinn they're going to move Mosley over and put Jared in there. I think Mosley is playing Jared's position. Surely they don't have Quinn or Quincy playing the run-stopping linebacker, right? He has to be playing the weak inside linebacker. Just assumption. The guy's like, 5'7", 160 pounds or something, or used to be.
He's listed at 5'11", so it's the NFL is probably a little shorter than that, yeah.
Well, right. So, anyways, you know, but you got him, you got to play him. I mean, now, again, we're not telling you to go get rid of Cunningham, don't drop it. You know, folks, we're talking deep leagues when we're talking about this. This is deep waiver wire stuff. I mean, these guys would be serviceable for you if you're having a lot of problems, but don't do anything crazy. Not yet. Let's give it another week and see where we're at. And after that, we're not going to have a choice but to deal with it. So you're just going to have to roll with the waiver wire.
Yeah, and I forgot to bring it up after we were talking about the lines, but we had talked about how Washington has that weird split going on with their safeties. We kind of thought it had been Collins and McCain, but then past 2 weeks, Curl's been up in the 70%. Collins this week was below 60%. We talk about another big name IDP. Just all sorts of weird stuff going on there. And there's another one, too, I wanted to throw in because I know it was one of the people you had talked about with Brandon Jones. No. You know, he was at 65 and then 43%, and he had a great week for him, but just all over the place in these secondaries.
He did that last year for him. When the MSR was right, he came through every time. If the MSR was just, you know, he usually matched whatever it was, solid, strong. If it was weak, then he had a few, you know, it was funny. That's how I tracked him. And that's why I named him as one of my breakouts this year. But I was expecting, and I still expect, and I really hope that he starts getting more like an 80 to 90%, and I was watching this game, and he was actually a lot of times when his alignment, the linebackers would move up, and they left him like in the middle of the field, in the middle of the linebacker position. It was really interesting, and he did produce from there.
Yeah,
and this is just like you said, another case of one of those players that we've been talking about. He's in a rotation. He's producing with 65% is not necessarily what you want normally, but I mean, if the guy is producing at that, you've got to consider it. Especially in deeper leagues and with these underperformers and. It's even right now kind of rough to get a constant DB3, not alone. So taking a chance on this guy, you got to weigh your odds. Just like I mentioned Bentley, and I mentioned the linebacker Bentley, and then Roberts down in Miami linebacker. Some of those other players out there, we're going to have to possibly start pulling triggers on these guys. I've got Brandon Jones in my on a couple of my rosters, and I've got good guys, safeties ahead of them. But if that matchup is right, I'm putting him in. If it's better than a matchup of one of my other dudes, I'm also right to a hot hand. It's like curse.
Yeah.
Right to hot hand.
Well, and you got to look at, too, how these guys are used. Brandon Jones being played up close to the line more as a linebacker. You see that out of Ronnie Harrison, too, who's had some fantasy production this year in the 2 games where he wasn't kicked out. You're going to get more production out of those guys that are sort of a pseudo linebacker in the box closer to the line than probably a deep free safety, like sort of what you run into with John Johnson here and how the Browns are using him. So knowing how these guys are being utilized, even if it isn't that 80 or higher snap count, can matter when you're trying to sort out who out of this rotation that you're going to want to look at.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And yeah, I mean, that's sort of the end here that we were going to be talking about, just the use of these guys. So do you know off the top of your head, like any of these other interesting timeshares that you've run across that have taken you by surprise?
Timeshares?
I don't mean to put you on the spot here.
No,
one of them,
I'm thinking.
We thought one was going to be a timeshare, and that Raiders linebacking group has actually stabilized a bit, which is interesting to see. I mean, I thought the way Gruden handled things, it would be more of a mess, but you have Perryman, who is pretty much the main guy, and then Littleton's at least showing signs of life for use for people that had invested in him.
I mean, you got the Giants safety situation.
Yeah. And Peppers is not doing a whole lot out of that. Ryan's having another good year. And honestly, I haven't heard much out of McKinney, so I don't think that probably.
Yeah, I think he had a decent little contest this past week. I'm not sure what the stats exactly were, but I could have swore he had a little bit of a good one.
He had 5 solos and an assist. So out of a safety, not bad.
Yeah, well, probably with his playing time, it's hard to tell. I don't know what's going on up there.
With that whole defense, yeah. And, you had talked about how we were sort of used in the IDP world to these defensive lineman rotations. And maybe that's just what we have to sort out with the rest of these positions, with the way that they're using it. With those big bodies always slamming into each other, you got to get those guys moved out more. We've adapted to it in regards to that. And maybe that's just the way of the future here, that we're going to have to be looking at things.
Right. Yeah. That's, I find it intriguing because I've always believed in the matchups. I've always believed in kind of looking ahead and weighing the matchup just as much as the talent of the player, because you can have such an average player that just via matchups or his opportunity can just, consistently get you through.
Yeah.
You might not have like a Chuck Clark day where half the starters or 5 of the starters are sick. So he just absorbed all that 12, 14 tackles, whatever it was. I think he had an interception.
Yeah, he had a heck of a game.
Yeah. I love Chuck Clark. Chuck Clark's my man. He was a breakup call of mine a few years ago. he's something else, but he still usually never produces like that.
Yeah, and some of these guys too, it just if you're sort of that third or fourth guy on a defense that isn't being paid attention to for the defensive line, sometimes that can get you these hot streaks. A guy that came to mind, I think we'd mentioned a couple of weeks ago, BJ Hill. Once he got moved to the Bengals, just with sort of those other guys, Hubbard, Hendrickson, they have Reeder, Ogunjobi. Those guys are drawing more of the attention. And despite not having huge snap counts for them, Hill's sitting, I think 40% about is his highest in the given week. He's getting you points. I mean, interior lineman type leagues, he's a top 10 guy right now, which again, most people not on your radar. So again, we're not telling you to go out and sell the farm to get these guys, but if you can get them off, you have, injured reserve player you're moving to, so you got to have a roster spot, pick them up and ride the hot hand to go. And like we said earlier, check out Gridiron Ratings, be subscribed over there and log in and, check out Gary's matchup ratings. There's a lot of information that he puts into that. I've checked it out myself. And it's a valuable tool. And the more tools that we have to utilize, the better decisions we can make.
No, hey, that's a funny thing about these charts too. And I want to make sure everybody understands. Sometimes when I'm doing these charts, we got somebody just got done performing really well, but then I look at their MSR for the next matchup. There's no reason to bring that guy on and offer him as a waiver wire suggestion if I don't believe in that matchup. So I search and I find. I usually go a little bit deeper. I do go a little vanilla, but at the same time, all these guys have solid or strong matchups coming up. And there's another thing. They all have the right amount of snap counts. So I'm having trouble adding like Brandon Jones on here, but he's not what I would consider full time. He might make it next week. What's this? The Seattle DL defensive end, Taylor, maybe. He's been doing really
Terrell
good.
Taylor, yep.
But his snap count's so low. Who was you was just talking about with the 40% or something? BJ Hill, how can you put these guys on? Because that's working against them. Usually, if they're not, even for a defensive tackle, you want to see in the 60 percentile. Usually,
if you're regularly depending on him, it's going to burn you at some point. Yeah.
Right. It's just that odds against, and I don't think it's fair to put them on here. A few names, folks, that we've added on here. If you want to check us out, I really appreciate it. Check out the tipster. We got couple of cornerbacks on there. We got Wilkins and Siller, Miami defensive linemen are probably good play. Should be good play. The fellow that we was talking about that I couldn't pronounce his name before, the New Orleans, it's Kpassagon.
Yeah, his first name's Tano.
Yeah,
and
so
Passanois or something like that.
Right. So I've actually got him back on the waiver wire. He started out there week 1, but then he got hurt. We got Wingard. Actually, Wingard's becoming a pretty damn good play for Jacksonville at the free safety position. I mean, it's another matter of some kind of consistency. He's outperformed a couple of the studs. What are you going to do? Unfortunately, Jenkins fell off this past week. So,
he did.
Yeah, and that was actually a really good matchup. Maybe it was just solid, but to fall completely off is it's not good. Consistency's going to be
worrisome.
What you try to do is, like, I got the three rule thumb or whatever, 3 rules of the thumb. They got to make it 3 weeks in a row, no matter once you get them on there. So it doesn't matter what the MSR. So what you really look at is, say you're in your 3rd week and this player's got a weak MSR, but all of a sudden he's solid in that contest, or he's above solid in that contest. Man, that's a real indication that player can probably pull it off and stay consistent no matter what. Then you have to give them the upside. So if it's actually a weak MSR the next time around, if he actually proves he can beat him for a couple of times, then you can give him that upside to a solid play every time. It doesn't matter. It's really cool to watch rolling the rolling. This is how I've been doing it for years. I don't know why I haven't shared with people. Check it out. I'm just bragging now, man.
All right, go ahead, brag away. It's great stuff to have, and people should be checking it out.
Yeah, I'm just excited about this new format. It's something I've been wanting to do for a long time, and until just automating all the charts with Jeff here at Gridiron Ratings. We've merged. One of the best decisions I ever made was merging with Jeff in Gridiron Ratings. I can tell you that. Happy as hell.
Make sure, like we said at the start of the show, not only do you go and subscribe on YouTube for those giveaways at every 25 subscriptions, you're over on Gridiron Ratings checking out all his information too. It's right there at the top. He's got his own little IDP section in his office where you can check out all the sit start stuff, rolling waivers. It's great, and it's certainly worth the money. So please go subscribe. Do you have any parting words of wisdom heading into week 4 for anyone?
Hang in there, folks. It's always been chaotic at the first few weeks of any season. This just seems a little bit more uneven. It's like our pinball machines on tilt.
And we're still only about, going to be after this week, about a quarter of the way through. There's a lot of season left. And even if you're 0-3, yeah, it's hard, but you can come out of it. You got to just be
17 weeks, folks.
Yep.
Got to make it. This is definitely, it sounds like a season. I'm not sure, maybe even on the offensive side of the ball in the NFL, the way they're treating things now, it might be the last man standing. Whoever can get that depth somehow, get the right person in at the right time.
Oops. Well, I guess that's probably a good note to end the show. My camera's falling down here. So make sure, like we said, YouTube, check out Gridiron Ratings and go to their website, gridironratings.com. See all the Gary stuff. Twitter, you can find both of us. Ask us questions. But thank you for tuning in. Tune in Thursday night to be going over sort of new information between now and then, and a little bit of information on the Thursday night game with JJ Winter, Tripp, and Gary. And we will see you next week back with James. So have a good night, everyone.